In this second part of a two-part series, I will be exploring the buffer memories of Signal Hill and Pleasant Valley and the operator Sarah Easton. If you are curious, I explored the buffer memories of the rural store in Thompson's Crossing and its operator Dan Presnell in part 1. It will be linked in the description. Before I continue, please make sure to comment, like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so I can keep making these videos. File name, Easton Journal 1. First day on the job. Besides the usual reports, the weather service asked me to keep a personal log of some kind. It sounds like the fellow who was here before me had a touch of cabin fever towards the end, and they thought it would be good for me to write a bit. And with the interference the weather service guys have been seeing this year getting the emergency weather warnings out, there might be some downtime anyways. But the good news is that when we are on the air, they're going to let me broadcast a little bit of music as well. Should be fun. File name, Easton Journal 15. Found myself whistling Richard Strauss' tone poems the whole way up the hill this morning. Maybe Don Quixote a little later today? Then again, that's more a piece for the mainlanders these days. No windmills out here, only wind. We'll go with Zarathustra instead. It's been nice to get airtime between weather reports to broadcast some music. Something to perk up the sleepy days out here in the valley. File name, Easton Journal 19. After a long shift, these notes start to feel more and more like a confessional. Tough for whoever the weather service ends up replacing me with up here. They'll have to read through these things. Then again, I'm starting to mumble and sing to myself while I work, Glenn Gould style. It's probably better to write some of it down. File name, Easton Journal 30. My folks were pretty down and out this morning before I left. I promised my dad I'd see about switching up the playlist a little today. Maybe some Beatles would cheer him up? It'd be nice if the store at the crossroads could get coffee delivered back up here to the valley, finally. I miss that little mocha machine we had at the conservatory. The practice rooms were tiny, even smaller than this hut. A hot cup always made the hours drift by a bit quicker. Still, even spending all day in this weather station, I don't miss the mainland. File name, Easton Journal 43. Great news! I got word yesterday there might be a piano again down in Milton. Only a dusty old upright it sounds like, but still. The manager at the credit union pulled some strings and had one delivered from the mainland, so the school could do sing-alongs and stage some plays. I had been down there a few times to play some Bach on the church's old organ, but it's just not the same. I have to gas up my dad's truck tomorrow, so I might drive down there to take a look. I hope it's been tuned since it came off the ferry. Right off the bat, you can see why I split the buffer memories of Pleasant Valley into two videos. Sarah Easton and Dan Presnell are very different people sharing wildly different stories. Sarah, the new radio and weather service announcer for Signal Hill, was certainly a musical character. Her story in the long dark involves her replacing the previous announcer who had gotten a bit of cabin fever. The weather service, which is most likely a provincial or national weather service, asked Sarah to keep a log. The writing would help her avoid the same fate. On a side note, this is definitely not related to the tales. It is not related to the fact that writing was used as a tool to help the victims of the Langston Mine outbreak keep their focus. I don't know why, but part of me believes that someone will probably comment about this. I promise you these are not related. Sarah is only 29 years old anyways, and I believe these buffer memories were written not long before the first flare, so she couldn't have been in the mine during the experiment. Back to the main topic, living alone inside for too long can be bad for you. Although, from personal experience having basically stayed indoors for 2 years straight during the recent global pandemic, I guess we are all built a little differently. In Sarah's case, it sounded like she lived in Pleasant Valley and had parents there according to these buffer memories. The first buffer memory tells us how her job at Signal Hill started, what her general duties were, and how she decided to brighten up the valley through music. The second buffer memory shows us how important music is for her. She references Richard Strauss, a German composer and conductor known for his tone poems and operas. Don Quixote, a Spanish novel character obsessed with chivalry in a time where it is long dead. And Zarathustra, which refers to the protagonist of a philosophical fiction called Thus Spoke Zarathustra by Friedrich Nietzsche. I'm terribly sorry if I mispronounced any of these words. Sarah is very obsessed with music. She is whistling tone poems by Richard Strauss on her way up to Signal Hill. She then mentions Don Quixote, but realizes it is more of a mainland piece. In the story, Don Quixote famously battles a windmill believing it was a giant. I think what she means here is that the windmill in the story is more relevant to mainland Canada. This may confirm that wind power is not widely used on Great Bear Island, despite it being so windy. It is most likely relatively common on the mainland. Don Quixote is also a tone poem by Strauss. Tone poems are a form of program music from the latter part of the 19th century, which Strauss is known for. Program music is a form of music art that acts as a narrative. Therefore, these tone poems are basically poems in the form of music. One such tone poem that you might be very familiar with, or at least part of one, is called Sunrise from the tone poem Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Thus Spoke Zarathustra is both the name of a tone poem by Strauss as well as the writing by Friedrich Nietzsche of the same name, which inspired the Strauss tone poem. Again, I'm terribly sorry if I mispronounced any words. It seems that someone at Hinterland really loves German literature, culture, and historical figures because there are so many references to them throughout the Long Dark. The third buffer memory tells us that Sarah is going to be replaced soon. This makes me wonder if this specific job is seasonal, requiring a replacement every 3 months. Previously, it was mentioned cabin fever was a concern for the weather service, so this may be how they work around it. If this is the case, it may allow for Sarah to take a break, allowing someone else to take over during that time. Whatever the reason for her replacement is, she has been writing what she feels like is a confessional. She worries that whoever ends up replacing her will have to read through these journal entries. It may be a part of how they combat cabin fever, which will give them something to do during downtime. She notes that she has been singing to herself in a particular style, Glenn Gould style. Glenn Gould is a Canadian classical pianist famous for interpreting the keyboard works of Johann Sebastian Bach, or Bach in English. It's important to note that Gould recorded works of many different composers, including Richard Strauss. Sarah realized it would be more productive to write her thoughts down instead of singing them to herself. This fourth buffer memory gives us a clue for the rough timing of when Sarah took over as the weather service announcer at Signal Hill. She mentions the lack of coffee at the rural store. If you want to know all about the rural store, the operator Dan Presnell, and the buffer memories he left behind, definitely check out this video, which will be linked in the description. In that video, I used a few different clues as well as a lore note with a typo of his name to estimate the approximate time of writing for Dan's buffer memories. I believe they are written approximately a few months to a few weeks before the start of the Quiet Apocalypse. He mentions in one of them that coffee he ordered for the rural store was missing from the order. It seems that supply shortages led to the disappearance of coffee from the valley. This may also indicate that Sarah's buffer memories were also written a few months to a few weeks before the start of the Quiet Apocalypse. She mentions how she missed a coffee machine from a musical conservatory. Considering she is 29, it's possible this was part of a post-grade school education, which she would most likely have been receiving on the mainland during the early years of the collapse. She most likely then moved back home to Great Bear Island later on. Here we also see that she may be living with her parents during this difficult time. From personal experience, living with your parents at this age during hard times is relatively common, especially in real life at this very moment in time. Her parents seemed upset about something, but it isn't elaborated on. She offered to play the Beatles to mix things up on the radio to help cheer them up. On a related side note, if you remember the Who is Hank video from 6 months ago, he wrote something that might be related to this video's topic. Sitting in a tower like this for days, weeks, months on end is enough to drive anyone crazy, even if I didn't have anyone to talk to on the radio. And just let me say, I wish that chatty lady would shut up once in a while. I believe that the chatty lady he is talking about is Sarah Eston announcing the weather and playing her music on the radio. It would not surprise me if she also spent some time talking about the music she played. Hank really did not like people and became a forest lookout to be away from them. I'm guessing that Sarah might have driven him a little crazy. Go check out that video linked in the description if you want to know more about Hank's story. The final buffer memory for Signal Hill and the final one for Pleasant Valley has some contradictory information based on what I have speculated so far. So far, I'm estimating the timing of both Sarah and Dan's buffer memories to just before the Quiet Apocalypse. This final buffer memory mentions the credit union at Milton. If you recall this note from Wintermute episode 1, the credit union seized all banking services in September 2012, which is shortly after the start of the collapse. I believe there is an explanation for why it would seem that the credit union is still functioning even up to the start of the quiet apocalypse. If you watched the Memories of Milton Part 1 video from 5 months ago, you might know the story of Anika Longmire, a resident of Milton. In her buffer memories, Anika is describing the hardships of life in Milton after the collapse. These buffer memories are also found in the credit union where Anika worked. Just because all the banking services stopped doesn't mean that the credit union itself was fully closed. This note may indicate that global banking services such as account openings, money transfers, and cash deliveries would stop. That doesn't necessarily mean the credit union shut down completely. It's also possible that it did shut down and then opened up later in time. Either way, we know that Anika was leaving these diary entries in the credit union sometime after the collapse. We can also see that the credit union was still in use just before the quiet apocalypse. The credit union shows plenty of signs that it was still in use. Grandmother even sent Will to retrieve a personal belonging of hers that was being kept in the credit union vault. Clearly, the credit union was still being used to protect people's savings and valuables, at least locally. Based on the buffer memory, the credit union manager got a piano for the schoolhouse delivered to the island. We don't know a whole lot about the schoolhouse in Milton other than it was used by residents to escape the cold after earthquakes or used to house outsiders passing through town. We don't know if many kids were in Milton at the time of the quiet apocalypse. Considering Jason Longmire, Anika's husband, was mentioned in the highway robbery note from Wintermute episode 1, we can assume their daughter Steph did in fact grow up in Milton. She would be a teenager or young adult by this time. Either way, I don't think many people were raising kids in Milton or elsewhere on Great Bear Island. In the end, we don't know if the schoolhouse was still used as a school. Considering the differences in population and local amenities between Milton and Thompson's Crossing, the residents might have been attempting to create some kind of community-based activity from Milton. They don't have a community center or an open church like Thompson's Crossing, so maybe this piano and the sing-alongs and stage plays might have been a community effort to bring life back to Milton. Despite Sarah's excitement towards this piano, it is hard to not recall what eventually happened to the piano and the residents of Milton when the auroras of the Night of the Lights ignited the schoolhouse. On a final note, it is also possible that I could be wrong about the timing of the buffer memories and the missing coffee at the rural store. It could have been a similar incident from several years prior. The only reason I have a minor doubt about this is the mention of the schoolhouse, but we don't know if it was still in use as a school or not. Either way, I believe I am right with the timing of things, mostly because the missing coffee is too coincidental to not be the same occurrence. This final buffer memory marks the end of the Memories of Pleasant Valley series. We are also running out of buffer memories, with only Desolation Point and Timberwolf Mountain left. Of all the sets of buffer memories in the game, Sarah's are the least depressing. It was a nice change of tone and theme in a game with such a dark and depressing pre-game history. I learned a lot about musical composers of centuries past and that someone at Hinterland loves to include references to German people and culture in the game. Our look into Sarah's musical life was a breath of fresh air. Sometimes we need a break from all the sadness and desperation in the post-collapse world. All she wanted to do was brighten up your day. All the way from Pleasant Valley on Great Bear Island, this is ToastyBits signing off. If you want to catch up on any lore I've already covered, you can check out all the various playlists for the history of the Long Dark, Wintermute, Rudiger's Project, the people and places of Great Bear Island, and the buffer memories. They will be linked in the description. If you enjoyed this lore video for the Long Dark, please don't forget to comment, like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so I can keep making them.